Moment tonight. Welcome. Many thanks for joining us. We bring you the real stories.
Have you put pepper in the tea?
My environment alone will tell you that I'm rich. I've chosen to be in one of the very shallow pits. They also do have miscreants, but it doesn't mean that all of them are criminals.
We do not have a good geo-database of our mineral resources.
This is a time for us to share the oil money.
So terrorism is not going to be accepted on this continent.
If you see them coming here and going back, they will be killed.
But God willing, I'll be back alive.
We're just about leaving on the night patrol with the AU forces here in Somalia.
The real issues, the real talk.
We are working together for the development of Ghana.
It means that we have separation of powers.
Already we're talking about moving from what? A deficit of some 9% to 6.5%.
The critical challenge that faces every leader in the world today is the issue of creating jobs.
We will put at least 1 million people to work.
Ghana, after 16 years, has a public structure that is not responsive.
Join me, Abdulhai Moment tonight from Monday to Friday, 8:15 p.m. to 9:15 p.m. on GBC 24. Right, welcome back. This is Moment Tonight. Tonight we focus our attention on students' agitation, and I'm sure that you are aware of happenings at the KNUST, but the KNUST issue cannot be limited to that school only, because we also know that at the University of Ghana there have been in the past some skirmishes between students and authorities, which led to the closure of the university for a number of years. I am a victim of that kind of situation, where for 2 years after I had successfully passed my SSCE, I still had to stay home for close to 2 years before I could move on to the university. What it means is that for people like me and those who were before me, our lives were truncated, our educational lives were truncated for 2 years because of student agitation. What is it that goes into negotiations between students and the authorities in the schools and so on? And that's the conversation we want to have today. We're not limiting it to the KNUST issue, but we'll extend it and try to find solutions. Recently, even at the UDS, we all know about the situation where some journalists were alleged to have been beaten up by some students, almost degenerated, and so on and so forth. I've been joined in the studio by three distinguished gentlemen. To my immediate left is Mr. Stephen Asante-Bekwai. Mr. Asante-Bekwai is a lawyer, but more importantly, he is a former SRC president of KNUST. And as we speak, within the context of the agitations currently, he is the lawyer for Katanga Hall. And you recall that Katanga Hall is one of the male halls that was reconstituted to become a mixed hall, and the students there, in fact, it forms the genesis for all of these agitations. Thank you very much, Mr. Bekwai, for joining us here. Okay. In the middle there is a man who not too long ago was the president of the National Union of Ghana Students, Mr. Lukman Abubakar. He's here with us in the studio. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm glad to have you here. And of course, we've been joined by Kabu Nartey. Kabu Nartey is KNUST secretary. We are glad that Kabu has joined us here this evening as well.
A co-secretary.
A co-secretary.
Yes, and a co-president. He was also a co-president at the point in time.
Okay, so and maybe that's a very good start. I mean, for this conversation, because even at the student level, we know currently, even as we speak, KNUST and the local SRC of KNUST at some point were at loggerheads. They disagreed. And for me, as an independent observer, it tells me that even the student front is not united. And here you are, even before the beginning of this conversation, talking about co-president and co-general secretary. There are problems within the student fronts, aren't they?
Admittedly, yes. Good evening to your viewers, and good evening to my co-panelists. I mean, regrettably, admittedly, there are problems, you know, for the student movement, and even the umbrellas that are supposed to, you know, galvanize this movement in preaching what is right for students. And I think that the first thing to solving the problem is admitting, okay, that is how come now I even put on myself the tag of co-secretary, and then I would want you to also address him by co-president. I think where we find ourselves is a discovery stage for our student movement, and then a reawakening process. Because if you have a divided front, and then we are faced with a lot of, you want to call, brutalities or oppression, as the KNUST Uprising episode suggests, then you realize that there is a need to patch our front to be able to have a stronger voice. And for me, a lot of people say this issue is unfortunate. They always start with a statement, it's unfortunate we find ourselves where we are. I actually would want to start that it's fortunate we do, because by this, some way, somehow, we get to realize that there are a lot of issues we must solve, and it starts with the unity process first. Then we get to confront some of these matters. And so it's regrettable, I keep saying this, but clearly we have admitted, and there are actually unity process as we speak, which we have promised the students of this country, and we are making progress towards.
Lookman, co-president, is that what you were?
Yes.
Oh yes.
But let me say, it's been a great pleasure being in this studio for the first time. Kabu Nartey here has been in the struggle, and I just want to believe.
You may want to lift up your voice a bit so we can.
I just want to believe and hope that at this time we'll get the narrative right. But before I even come to substance of whatever we are going to discuss, it's very important we acknowledge the fact that there was a struggle just 2 weeks ago in KNUST. It's important we hold a break for them, at least a minute of silence for the various students who might be involved in this struggle. I mean, it's part of the student struggle, but I pray that going forward we fashion a very solid solution to some of these happenings. There should always be a dialogue forum, such that students and leadership or school management can always come together to at least draw and not the war and all of those things. So I say a very good evening going out to all the students that were involved, that stood up to be counted in the process of the struggle. But let me say something before we talk about these issues. I read a book, I think some years now. The book is written by Bisa Moyo. The title of the book is The Date. Now, I'm not coming to talk about the date, but I'm going to read a note from that book. And the note reads like this: to the excellencies of Europe and officials of Europe, we suffer enormously in Africa. Help us. We have problems. We lack rice as children. We lack food. We want to study. Help us so that we study and be like you in Africa. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because some of these little things has global implications. And I say this because in Africa, we are trying to solve the problems of Africa, not just in Ghana. Because if you had followed me for some time now, you see me in Rwanda, you see me in Uganda, you see me in Sudan, and all of those things. We have actually identified that, look, the problems of this country extends beyond Ghana, the borders of Ghana. So whatever we do at the local level, we should think of it going globally, because it's got global implications. So I am saying this because, look, we have problems in Africa, and nobody can solve the problems for us until we, our own, show up to put our shoulders on the wheel and say, look, enough of this. Especially student leaders, you would agree with me that it's from the student leadership that we have the mainstream politicians. So if the student leadership is always going to be agitations, it's always going to be rioting, it's going to be struggle. I mean, there should be a point in time where we say, look, enough of distance, and then we forge ahead in unity. And that we should not have, in the history of NUCS, in the history of XRCs, in the history of whatever association we have, especially NUCS, the umbrella body of all the associations in Ghana, we should not have a situation where we have divided fronts. Our fronts must be united, because look, when we are divided, our voice are actually diminished. No one takes us for serious. You don't have voice, but it's high time we begin to own up to the realities of the issues and say, look, enough of this, and that we are going to forge ahead in unity. And we really don't care which politician is behind this person, which politician is funding this person. We are coming out to say, look, enough of distance. We should own up to our own issues and manage our own issues. I think when we begin to think this way, there will be a paradigm shift from the way we do things, and the way our thinking as student leaders will be refined moving forward.
Okay, so you have been a student leader before. I'll come back to you and find out exactly what has been your thinking from the past. But we have Mr. Bequin here. He's a lawyer for Katanga, and you were former president of SRC at KNUST. Now, I have seen that when this whole Buhaha began, you were at the heart of it. You actually wrote to the courts asking for an injunction to be placed on the decision to convert Katanga Hall in particular to a mixed hall. But I'm asking a question as a neutral observer. What's the big deal? It's the same Katanga, except that females are now coming, and so what?
Thanks so much. I must say good evening to cherished viewers. If you tend to look at it as just females joining males in a hall, perhaps on the surface it looks good, but I must say that we must go beyond that. Yes, the matter is still before court. The substantive matter is still before court. What happened was that we applied for an interlocutory injunction to restrain the management, and for that matter the Vice Chancellor, from going ahead with his decision to convert the all-male hall, University Hall, and then the other hall is the Unity Hall, into mixed halls. In fact, it turned out that later Africa Hall was also converted. Africa Hall used to be an all-female hall. So we realized that no, it's just a matter of games being played with the students. You see, we had a question that we wanted to find an answer to. We're saying that yes, the reason for converting the hall kept changing from one point to the other. So we realized that we said no, there are some games being played somewhere. You started, they said females or who were being accommodated outside the campus were subject to rapes, being attacked by rapists. So the Vice Chancellor said he wanted all the females to come on campus. Then he went ahead and said, we will start with 43 females. They should go to Katanga, and they were continuing students. So we said no. If all females were subject to these attacks, why would you select 43 of them and bring them on campus? What about the others?
How many of them? Just 43?
43 to Katanga. That was the first letter dated the 28th June, 28 June 2018, which we got, with a list of 43 continuing students. So we said no, it cannot be the reason. Secondly, university, KNUST is practicing a system of in, out, out, out. First years come in and occupy the traditional halls. Second year you go out and look for your accommodation. Third year out, and final year out. In fact, and thereafter you go out. Why would you choose 43 continuous when we are supposed to go out to enjoy accommodations in the traditional halls. So they were not adding up. Then the reason changed from ladies were being raped to we want to increase the female intake. Then we say, can that be done by just merely mixing males with the females? Why would you do that? Because we had a notion that, look, if you say you want to increase female intake, that is fine. Nobody begrudges you. But the point is that for every 10 females that you bring to Katanga, you displace 10 males. At the end of the day, what will be the position of the males also? In our attempt to increase the number of females on campus, we end up displacing the males, who are also subject to other attacks, armed robbery and all that. Perhaps not the rapists, but there are other armed robbers and all those hooligans out there. So we said no. Mr. VC, I mean, it's becoming one too many. I mean, these reasons don't add up. They are not tenable to us. And we decided that no, we will have to write petitions. The alumni was writing. The Katanga student body was writing. I think SRC also wrote some petitions to the chancellor, who is Otufo Asantehene. We wrote to the president of the nation. We wrote to the minister for education. We wrote to the vice chancellor himself. I
understand that, but in these letters that you wrote, what was the crust of your message? Because you talk about for every female that is admitted into the halls, the traditional halls, then it will mean that there will be a corresponding number of males who will be displaced. But in every decision, you weigh the pros and cons, and where the pros outweigh the cons, then you proceed with it. You talk about armed robbers attacking the male students, but you have the absence of the rape. In the case of the females, you can have the armed robbers attacking them, and then you have the rape. So too, and so on the balance sheet, you find out that it is wiser, more prudent to give more females the opportunity than males. Simplicity.
In fact, we were not even accepting that excuse from the vice chancellor, because now along the line, when the vice chancellor said, okay, if Unity Hall and Katanga are all agitating over my decision to convert, no, they woke up one morning and said, Africa Hall, all female, you have also been mixed.
Right.
The female that you are seeking to protect, somewhere to be dislodged in favor of males.
Yeah, so I'm saying, so what was your main concern?
We said that, look, we cited some provisions in the Constitution. We looked at Article 17 of the Constitution. We said, no, this is discrimination. Completely. Because if you want to increase females at the instance of males, you do so by getting the facilities first. Legon had done it. They had involved, private participation in terms of buildings, accommodations, and all that. So now, even one student, if you want
I'll come to
double
you
rooms, you get that.
Yes. But I know that with universities, and you were SRC president,
Sure.
1993.
Yes.
Were you not a council member?
I was.
Were decisions
By
not
the
taken?
statute,
Were decisions not taken in your presence?
decisions were taken.
Did you not partake in the taking of those decisions on behalf of the student
we
body?
partook. I partook. in
Are you
decisions.
then suggesting that the SRC president of KNUST sat aloof and watched as these decisions were taken, and he did not say anything on behalf of the students? Kabu, I'll come to you shortly.
In fact, I must say emphatically and confidently that there was no such decision taken by the council. I'll tell you something. Some 5 or 6 years ago, I'm not very sure of the specific, but about 5 or 6 years ago, there was some clash between Katanga and Unity Hall. And then, just around the time, the University Council held a meeting. That's the highest decision-taking body of the university, that is Governing Council. They held their meeting, the usual meeting they had, and the issue came up. And then I'm told some of the members suggested that, look, to curb these insurgencies on the part of the students, let's mix them up. The late PV Obi was the chairman of the council then. Then he said no. Merely mixing up the halls or converting them from their status quo to, mixed halls wouldn't solve this problem of clashes of students. You done nothing. So what happened was that the council PV Obi instructed that let committee be established. So the committee was set up, and let this committee look into the roots of causes of these issues of clashes. And once that is done, then we can deal with the clashes itself, and not about cutting the leaves or the branches, but then we uproot the roots itself.
All right, I'll come back to you.
So that has been the matter. The committee was set up to go and look into it, and never came back with their report.
Right, I'll come back to you on the issue of clashes. But
just a quick one on what my mentor is saying. If these are very revealing, especially the latter part, where he stated that there wasn't, he can tell you in confidence that there wasn't any council decision. I find it very difficult to wrap my mind around that. But if that is what it is, then you can say the policy was an arbitrary policy. If I want to be very critical. Now, even granted there was such decisions, Abdul, this is what happened even at council level. So you have a number of people, and you have just the SRC president representing the over whatnot population. When such decisions are put to the table, he is entitled to only a vote. And so if the majority of council members say this is the way we want to go, whether the SRC president is for or against, they go on, perhaps using the simple majority. And I have written on several occasions about this activism, that if we can even find a way around this, where the SRC president will carry a lot of vote or a lot of weight, if the matter is going to be discussed, can we furnish the SRC president? Because I stand to be corrected, but I hear one of the things that happen is lobbying. If you have the lobbying skills, sometimes the president are not even aware of the matters to be discussed. So only few individuals, just go behind closed door, discuss what needs to be done, and it's more of like an ambush of our student leaders. So sometimes they may even vote against, come out and say they were not part of it. This is how some of the skirmishes begin. But I wanted to state that with where we find ourselves, there's only one thing or one description, and I think that should chart a new path of lesson for us. There was a breakdown of leadership at management level, respectfully. Why do I say this? There is that devil's advocate of why are you discriminating also against the ladies and all that and all that. Let's assume, granted, this is the truth, okay, students needed not to rebel and all that, which I will state some philosophical backings to it. Now it happened that students rebelled, that they wanted their voices heard because of the silence and perhaps the so-called oppression they talked about. I think that the reasonable thing leadership could have done was to handle this matter in a more decorous manner. They've taken to the street, peaceful march, they say. They started destroying things and all that. Even before that, what was the engagement thus far? And after, if you go into the merit of the issue, so the SRC president issues out a planned boycott of lectures, which is in the merit of our law. Okay, non-violent movement are allowed in student activism. Then instead of perhaps calling the SRC president or the SRC to rescind on their decision and also use their same communication channel to call students back to the classroom, there was a counter release from the dean of students So the sequence of happenings tells you that right from the word go, the engagement was not too much or was not forthcoming, and it was not satisfying in terms of the students' side. Let me just read this with your humble permission. It was a memoir I wrote this year, with your permission. Activism is defined by Lusna 2005, Albert 1966, as activities either in support or in opposition to regimes and their leaders pursued by students of tertiary institutions. The underlying word is leaders. Then I move on to say that these activities, revolutionary or diplomatic or a hybrid, are dependent on the government or leadership of the day. Now this clearly tells you that even the taking to the street for the in the first instance, or thinking about doing that, was dependent on the government or the leadership of the day. I'm not talking about the national government, I'm talking about the local government of KNUST. So then you ask, what were the internal mechanisms? And Senior Patriot clearly outlines what were done before the last resort, which was, you know, having a peaceful protest. Then leadership perhaps thought that, you know what, again and again, SLC, you know, you're a student, so we can just, you know, suppress you and say that go back to the classroom. And we have some students who, for the fear of being failed or missing out of class, went to the classrooms. Now, this was the unhealthy situation at KNUST, which I thought that with skillful, diplomatic, tactful, and listening leadership, we wouldn't get to where we are. That is not also to justify the destruction of properties and all that. I issue a statement that in as much as I get to, you know, solidarize with our warrior comrades, I just want to call on them to, you know, stop the damages, because it comes back to us as a people.
So you put the blame entirely at the doorstep of leadership,
as
management level.
Yes,
of the
as a remote cause,
but not leadership at the student level.
Abdul, what the SLC sought to do was say that we've had a couple of brutalities, okay, and one, you took perhaps our tradition away from us, you converted our halls. Then there was another thing of taking our Friday ritual away from us, which was the morale. So it looked like now you have a very huge paradigm shift of policy. You take you truncate our history or tradition. Then to add salt to injury, you take perhaps our source of entertainment from us. I'm just trying to put myself in the book.
Source of entertainment is one that usually degenerated into acts of immorality, acts of violence. If constantly you have two male halls clashing anytime there is some entertainment or sporting activity, you have, and we've covered stories where students have been injured because Katanga and Unity had clashes. I mean, if you were the leader, you would want to take measures to curb this happening.
Abdul, are you trying to suggest to us that every time there is morale, Friday rituals, there are clashes?
Not every time.
Certainly not.
I have been to a few.
Certainly
I
not.
enjoyed myself.
Exactly. So that perhaps those pockets of those classes should not, you know, blanket your policy of taking it away from them. There are ways of there are ways of, you know, controlling these issues and not necessarily taking it away from them. There they may have a cause to perhaps question it.
I'll come back to you. Look, you've been listening to the conversation, and when Mr. Bequin was ending, he asked a question about whether or not, I mean, he made a statement that converting male halls into mixed halls will not solve the problem. And then I remember, I mean, you look at University of Ghana, the Vandals as against Opomates. I mean, Oponglo is a Sabah Hall and XB. It's a mixed hall, and yet there are always clashes between these students. We have reported here about clashes that went really, really bad between Sabah and XB and the Vandals. But really, my question is, at the student leadership level, how should such incidents be handled?
Thank you very much. In fact, I really appreciate the submissions made by our senior man here and that of Kabu. But Abdul, you will agree that Marcus Garvey said that if it is in the mind of a man to commit a crime, there is no any human law that can stop him from committing such a crime unless conscience. Now, I mean, some of those things I have really sat down in my sober moment and I realized that, look, one, there is inadequate leadership. I wouldn't say there is lack of leadership, because there is leadership, but that leadership is not adequate. There's inadequate leadership. And two, there is no connection between our leaders, whether it is a national leadership or the local leadership. There is no connection between our leaders and that of the students. Trust me, converting a hall to a mixed thing shouldn't bring us to where we are now. I mean, no, if there is communication and if there is leadership, we shouldn't be where we are now. And look, that has reminded me of our impasse during the KNUST heydays. Look, look, at a point in time, it was we, the students, who were trying to even bring a finality to the whole issue. I mean, no one was interested. But like I told you, if there is in the interest of man to commit a crime, there is no law that will stop that man at conscience. So some of these student agitations, leadership must take interest into it. We must not sit down and throw our hands in despair and behave as if we are the proverbial ostrich that bury our head in the sand and forget that there is darkness. We must rise to the occasion to challenge some of these happenings. So for me, as a former student leader, I've handled student agitations before, and all of this boils down to communication and actually going out to prove to the aggrieved parties that, look, this is the way to go, this is the way we should handle our issues. Look, Abdul, people always feel more associated and more accepted when you share in their grief. People feel very connected to you. But when things happens at the remote level and you don't actually rise to the occasion to speak to it, you see that when it degenerates something bad, you would have no one to blame. So for us in the student struggle, I condemn that. If you go to my Facebook, well, I condemn whatever they have done. But I said it's very serious thing that, look, I stood with them and I thank them for having gotten up to be counted. Because look, KNUST, I have followed their things and I realized that, look, even students were keen at a point in time. In the university, I mean, for God's sake,
a video that went viral.
For God's sake.
Teacher Kane.
I mean, I have called in the SRC president and I have confirmed this things. I have been in the mill. Look, I have been calling day in. Even today, as I was driving to this place, I called the guy and I told him that, look, I was going to appear in this platform. What are the issues? What is the way forward? How are we going to handle the issues? We don't need lawyers to come and handle our issues for us. I mean, trust me, we don't need lawyers. It all boils down to leadership and communication. And Abdul, I have said something in my write-up on social media that, look, I was not actually energized about the actions of the Ministry of Education. I was not energized at all. And I will repeat this because, look, I mean, this thing had happened for over 3 days. And there is no any public condemnation or any public statement to this effect. I only saw that when the issues were getting out of hand, and then I went on social media and I saw a statement from the Ministry of Education. I mean, this is not the best way to go. And for us, I have always said something, the aluta continues until victory is ascertained. So we really don't care.
Well, you see, but the point is that when aluta continues, ultimately it is the student who suffers. Because salaries of lecturers, sometimes even when they go on strike for months, still continues to flow in. Students lose time, the semester has to be adjusted, and you are always at the losing end.
Yes, Abdul. Sometimes there is a proverb that you deny yourself food and get yourself fed eventually. That is how it is. For some reasons, yes, you lose out of lectures. Those times cannot be recovered. But I tell you that if you don't try to annex and then put your shoulders onto the wheels, stuff like this will not stop.
Okay. So let me come back to lawyer. But in the meantime, okay. So there's been a chronology of events after I call it the riots. The management of KNUST was asked to step aside, and an interim management committee was set up and that committee had the SRC president as part of it, but the vice chancellor was not a part. UTAG wasn't excited about this, and so they threatened to go on strike if the vice chancellor was not made a member of that committee. Earlier this morning, we were told that the vice chancellor had actually been asked to step aside. Now, before we came into the studio to begin this show, there was news that the vice chancellor had been asked to join the committee. So it keeps going back and forth. But currently, as at where we are you happy?
I would say yes at a point. I would say no. But before I go into that, let me add that. You see, the issue of conversion of the halls.
Let me also add that we are live on Facebook, and so for those who cannot watch us, you need to go out and do some stuff. You can still watch us on Facebook even as you go about your business. Sorry to interrupt.
Good. All right. The issue of the conversion of the halls and the stoppage of this or attempts to stop the morale. Morale means drumming and dancing. The students will do that up to 11, 12 midnight or something. They go and sleep. Nobody
so
hates,
just ordinary drumming. It's not ordinary drumming and dancing.
And
there's a lot
singing,
more and
perhaps
there's so much more to it, isn't there?
What again, apart from singing, drumming and dancing and jumping about? they were not attacking anybody.
Okay.
You understand? But beyond that, we heard of, and in fact, I personally saw some of these things, students being incarcerated in the UST police cells. The offense was that they are taking part in a morale something. But I don't know when drumming and dancing became an offense in Ghana. Yet on campus in US it was. What is even worse is that the local, campus security guards had also created their own cell. It will interest you to know that at a point, when some national security officers went to campus with, some of the alumni and other people, they went straight to UST police station, where they found about 11 or 7 of the students who had been incarcerated overnight there. It was there that they got to know that 4 other students had been incarcerated in the campus security guard cells overnight. The police commander didn't know. So you could see where the thing was heading towards. And perhaps when situations are like this, there is likely to be this sort of collision and eruption of violence, because the students were so suppressed and oppressed to the point that in fact there must be an outburst for the world to hear or see what was happening to them. You dare not wear Katanga t-shirt on campus, you will be bundled like a piece of paper by the security guards. They were referring to the students as cockroaches. So a whole lot of things were happening, and I'm not just exaggerating. So if the people out there don't know what the things that were happening, you would think that you just, superficially you just condemn the students for this. I think that was bad. So
these riots were just not about the conversion of the halls, but there was a lot more.
You could even see that the conversion of the halls is now relegated to the bank. It's just a remote cause. But the immediate cause was the suffering. Let me put it this way: it was a reign of terror unleashed on the students, men, women, first year, final year. Who cared? Some of the people who were incarcerated and were found in the cells came from Republic Hall, not Katanga, not Unity. You see, so these things were going to a point where the students had to, in fact, do whatever they could by way of a revolution.
And you think
to be
they're
heard.
justified?
Justified.
Yes,
and let me, before he comes in, let me state something. One would have thought that even after the violence and the vandalizing, properties and all that, and then the situation getting out of hands, one would have thought that the management will sit down and rethink. The student leadership will also sit down and rethink and merge at a point to find peace. You know, the release that came out, the university had been closed down. It will be recalled, or the students will be recalled in February 15th or thereabouts. On the 17th, 2 days after your recall, they will start exams. That was the release that came from the management. Students were going home in October. They will resume, they will be recalled in February
to write exams.
So you could see that
based on what?
So you could see that the suppression was still going on.
Kabu, quickly, we're beginning to run out of time now.
Abdul, I don't want it to sound like we are justifying all the actions and inactions of students. When you find yourself in a very tight corners like these, the most important thing to do is to cut the tree from its roots. Until we do look at the full height of the tree, but you want to go down. And that's exactly what perhaps these panelists are doing, myself inclusive. And so in as much as we want to condemn the destruction of properties and, the scaffolds and, physical exchange with security men and all that, you want to go down and look at what really sparked this whole thing. And one thing we are doing is establishing that there was tension building in the bellies, in the arms and all that of students. And there was a need to pour cold waters on these, flaming rods. Also, what we need to appreciate is that it's not only in KNUST we've had students who felt a bit aggrieved, of which they want to protest. And so they write and all that. And Abdul, our way of activism is now shifting from just releasing pieces, because if you don't take time, it will be a cliche and you'll not be taken for granted. And so, to what extent should we keep writing? And that is why our leadership need to be responsive to even the trivial matters when we bring to their fore. That is exactly where the crust of the matter is.
But are we not going to get to a point where then students will always be dictating to authorities how schools, universities should be run? If at every turn the students are saying, okay, with this new directive we don't agree, with that new directive we don't agree, a time will come when we will have authorities just in name, but who will be very powerless because students would wield all the power. Is that not where we're heading towards?
Abdul, I'm not omniscient, but I can guarantee you that if we have a shared responsibility of respecting, agreeing to disagree and engaging in dialogue, we wouldn't even have a situation where one person will be seen on the wheel dictating for another. Moreover, I keep using the word tension building in the bellies of these activists, because then it means that management, or most management, or some management in universities have been dictating for students for a very long time. So then there was a need to come out of their dungeons and then their cells. And so, and Abdul, I want to state this using this platform. I am very much concerned. I've spoken to Kelvin on a number of occasions. I'm very much concerned about the aftermath of all these. Are these students' leaders going to be victimized because they stood for the right thing? Are they going to be, as we use in our traditional activism circles, mafiaed? And that is where perhaps I want to call on the ministry and all stakeholders involved to handle this matter with the greatest of respect to students and their entitlement to doing activism in this country. Because if you do not take time, we're going to have a protracted or an impasse where students will, from now to whenever their grievances are going to be resolved at every point in time. I say point in time because there was the before, the during, and the after. If they are not going to see result, then we're going to find ourselves in this whole, confusion.
All right, let me bring Lukman into the picture now. Lukman, tell me, there are those who are of the view that government had no business interfering with the business of running KNUST, and by even in the first place dissolving the management committee could be seen as an attack on academic freedom.
I disagree. First of all, you want to look at KNUST, whether it's a private school or a public school. When that is established, then we'll now come to look at whether or not government has a stake or government has a right to interfere or to intervene in any matter. I disagree with that particular school of thought because KNUST, we agree, is a private school, it's a public school. So for that matter, whatever goes in there, the ins and out of the campus, government must be concerned. And I'm saying this because, you see, not only KNUST, government has a responsibility to interfere in any matter that is of concern to the nation. Because student unrest, rioting, and all of those things, in fact, it's a major threat to national security. So for that matter, government will have to rise to the occasion to put right those that are wrong. So for me, I disagree. Government will have to come in.
Yeah, but there are those, you see, who argue and say that, look, when you look at, from the past, some statements that have been made by some persons connected to government about the Vice-Chancellor of KNUST, the signs were clearly written on the wall that this is a man they wanted out. And then you look at events at the University of Education, Winneba, the fact that the Vice-Chancellor, Professor Avoke, had been moved out, that it appears as though the government has a certain agenda that it is gradually fulfilling by pushing people out and bringing in who they want.
Abdul, that is the politics of politics. And if you want to look at it that way, would have gotten everything wrong. For me, I believe that the fact that they have asked somebody who was part of the impasse to move aside, definitely most of the students are aggrieved because of maybe the actions or inactions of the Vice-Chancellor at the time. So for some of them, they would have been fulfilled and they would have been satisfied if the one who was with them during the struggles is set aside for a new person to come in. And I was trying to say something before he came in. I just felt that, look, there's a disconnect. We must learn how to communicate. Every situation demands communication. Every situation, whether it is in the right situation or it is in the wrong situation, people will have to communicate. And you must know where to communicate and the kind of soft spot you must touch in order for the communication to be effective. So I am just saying that, look, in as much as we are saying, people are reading all manner of meanings into it, for me, it's still in keeping with the parameters of the fact that we want to find a very long-lasting solution to the impasse in KNUST. So it's very laudable and it's very solid in my opinion. But that is not to say each time stuff like this happens, they must have to ask someone to step aside. No, we must fine-tune a solution going forward. Is that the only way to go? No. One, we must use dialogue in solving our problems. And two, they must allow students to be part of whatever decision is going to be taken under any school. In development, we have what we call people-centered development. You allow development in the hands of people, and they will better manage it. So if people are part of the decision-making process, they feel identified and they feel connected to the decision-making process. So whatever outcomes come, they all embrace it, and everybody walk to that way.
If I may add,
yes, quickly, we have 2 minutes.
2 minutes. All right. Let me add to it. It's been out there, people condemning government for interfering. They put it that way. I will tell you something. I'll just refer to some of these people who say that too. the Emergency Powers Act. Yes, that's Act 472. It is clear that, and that is Section 5, Section 6, when you read them, that the President of the nation has the power, all the powers, to take any step to stop any breach of peace or threat of it in the whole of the country or any portion thereof. So we ask ourselves whether US is a portion or part of Ghana. If it is yes, can the president invoke the emergency powers to intercede? Yes. By what means? By means that he thinks that if I do this, the problem will be solved.
But that's the Constitution and the same acts that you refer to not also define what qualifies to be described as an emergency.
Yes, it will. But it talks clearly, it talks about breach of peace, where there will be breach of peace. Maintenance of order. The two are there. So where about 40, I'm not sure whether it's 40 or exaggerated, but where about, as we hear, 40 vehicles have been vandalized and the immovable properties have been destroyed, then the breach of peace is there. Now this was gradually spreading. So the president sees it and says that no, I will invoke these emergency powers and put in place an interim council and give them a mandate of 3 months, not beyond that, to come up with a tangible solution. He didn't say the vice chancellor has been sacked or the other, he dissolved the other council, the previous council, but he said that after 3 months, you come with your report so that everything will be put in place. You see, and that is exactly what the president did. He did the same thing to GFA. The whole Ghana were clapping for him. When Anas brought out his video, he dissolved the GFA. Nobody spoke against it. Another breach, another threat of peace in another part of Ghana, everybody says no.
Okay, so Kabu, let's wrap up now. Government interference or government intervention?
Abdul, I would slightly, disagree on this, because now we had a part or a point where students were about losing their lives and state properties were being destroyed. And so many people have run commentary on the fact that the president acted through RECSEC. I feel what really mattered was we needed to restore sanity, and it needed to be restored as soon as possible. There were 2 parties involved, and none would have listened in that instance. So the university authorities thought that it was beyond them, and so they had to invite the police in. The students said that, you know what, we are also going all out and all that. So someone had to intervene. As to whether the intervention or the swift, dissolution or the closure of the school and all that was a breach or not, something had to be done to stop the situation. Could we have, if there are other means, would that means delay the preservation of lives and properties? That is some of the questions we should be asking ourselves. But more substantially, Abdul, I think the case of KNUST should not be viewed in isolation. Once upon a time, we've had students clashing with, state officials or personnel, security personnel, even our congresses. We've had students losing their lives. If you look at the account,
should really be wrapping up now,
and all that. We took it for granted, or we take it for granted when students speak in this country. I think this is a resurrection of what student movement can actually do in this country, of which university authorities, government, and whoever is involved should take students, as mere as they are, very serious.
All right. Look, I'll give you 1 minute.
Yeah, thank you so much. Before I wrap up, there is a lecture that is coming off the Accra International Conference Center is about Dumbo. Just entreating all of us seated here.
6th December.
Yes,
Thursday,
yes,
I'm
yes. I'm happy you are aware of it. Just entreating everyone to make a date to be part of it, because it's about leadership. And for us, we are young people. We actually want to go through the mill so that we will learn the norms of leadership very well. So that all of this things in future, we'll have our own way of handling it, so that we don't record this kind of skirmishes here and there.
All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I've enjoyed the discussion. I've been speaking with 3 gentlemen here. To my immediate left, Mr. Stephen Asantimbekwe. He's a former SRC president, KNUST. He's also a lawyer for Katanga Hall as they move to seek legal redress on getting the hall back to becoming, to what it's all of
gentlemen.
And in the middle is Mr. Lukman Abubakar, is former KNUST president, and Kabu Nartey is, he says, is co-KNUST secretary. All right, thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming, and thank you for being a part of the show tonight. We'll see you again tomorrow when we bring you another edition of Moment Tonight. Until then, you have a very good night. Bye-bye.
This is Moment Tonight. Welcome. Many thanks for joining us. We bring you the real stories.
Abdallah, have you put pepper in the tea?
My environment alone will tell you that I'm rich.
I've chosen to be in one of the very shallow pits. They also do have miscreants, but it doesn't mean that all of them are criminals.
We do not have a good geo-database of our mineral resources.
This is a time for us to share the oil money.
So terrorism is not going to be accepted on this continent.
If they see them coming here and going back, they will be killed.
But God willing, I'll be back alive.
We're just about leaving on the night patrol with the AU forces here in Somalia.
The real issues, the real talk.
We are working together for the development of Ghana.
It means that we have separation of powers.
Already we're talking about moving from what? A deficit of some 9% to 6.5%.
The critical challenge that faces every leader in the world today is the issue of creating jobs.
We will put at least 1 million people to work.
Ghana, after 16 years, has a public structure that is not responsive.
Join me, Abdul High Moment Tonight, from Monday to Friday, 8:15 p.m. to 9:15 p.m. on GBC 24.